And Chicago isn't alone in this. A report titled "Stopped, Fined, Arrested: Racial Bias in Policing and Traffic Courts in California" released this week tracked traffic offenses throughout the state of California and found that lower income and minorities were much more likely to face steep fines, lose their driver's license, and get arrested for unpaid traffic tickets. Today in the 4x4, we are taking 4 minutes during the 4 to take a deeper look.
And we are joined now by Mari Castaldi and Elisa Della Piana. Mari is the program coordinator for the East Bay Community Law Center, and Elisa is the legal director for the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights of the San Francisco Bay Area. Both organizations, I should say, participated in the research and writing of the report. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So, Mari, I'll start with you. License suspension rates. I mean, of anything, what opened your eyes? You talked about this taking a year. At the end of that year, the most.
Yeah, well, what opened my eyes really in the first place, I work at the East Bay Community Law Center, as you said, and work directly with folks who are impacted by this. So way longer than a year ago, we were seeing person after person come through the door saying, my license has been suspended, I owe often thousands of dollars, I don't have the money to pay it, and there's nothing I can do.
Suspended why? The
suspension is really related to the failure to pay the ticket. So it's not because of a DUI or because of a reckless driving charge. This specific law that we talk a lot about in this report, the suspension is related to the failure to appear in court or the failure to pay, not to the underlying offense.
Got it.
So for our clients, that really came down to, do you have the money to pay hundreds of dollars up front or no? And so what we also heard was not only were people losing their licenses and owing lots of debt, but the collateral effects were so great. People had job offers they couldn't take. They lost jobs, and some people were even ending up getting arrested or losing their cars just because of this underlying suspension, which again was related to inability to pay. So that really led us to want to take a deeper look. I will say that we saw a lot of people coming in the door, and the majority of them, the vast majority, were Black and Latino folks. And so we wanted to see what was really going on across the state and whether what we were seeing coming through the door was really representative of the larger issue, and we found that it was.
Well, Elisa, and it seems like you hear the stories and you hear how it all starts with what could be considered a minor traffic ticket that escalates. But when you talk about change and change that it sounds like that needs to be done within various police departments. But in order for that to happen, they need to recognize the change and see the change. Is that what this report is about?
Yeah, this report says there are a few simple things we can do. There's the issue of changing implicit bias, how we all see race, and that's going to take a long time. But there are a few things in our traffic court system that could make things more equal right away. It shouldn't be the case that someone gets the same violation, someone rolls a stop sign, someone else rolls a stop sign, one person writes a check and it's done. The other person faces license suspension, loss of job, arrest, losing their vehicle.
Because they can't afford to pay it.
Just because they make a choice between affording housing or a traffic ticket. And what our report says is that we can end license suspension as a debt collection tool. There is no reason that just because someone can't afford to pay, their driver's license should be taken away. Those should be for public safety. And the National Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators agrees that it's actually a waste of resources. It affects all of us if our resources are funneled toward officers being debt collectors with handcuffs instead of focusing on things that keep us safe on the roads.
Does the report actually claim racism within police departments across the state?
I mean, you have to look at what the cause is of all of this. There's explicit racism. You hear officers saying, I was instructed not to enforce traffic laws in whiter, wealthier communities because those are the people who vote.
And so I'll go to the other communities.
And so I'll go to the other communities. But there's also just the implicit bias that all of us have, the way that we constantly get messages about race, about white and black, and who is guilty and not. And like I said, I think that's a much longer issue, but we can make more equality in our system right now by taking these simple measures of changing the way license suspensions work and changing the way that and not arresting people just because they couldn't afford to pay.
So Ken Corney, I want to tell our viewers what he said. He's the California Police Chiefs Association president, and I saw a quote in the Sacramento Bee, and he said, "The members of our profession in doing their work every day focus on behaviors, not on ethnicity or gender." He went on to add regarding this exact report, "Any information that can be gained that helps our profession is being viewed as unbiased, and our job is worth looking at." Do you like that response? from someone like Ken?
I mean, I would say that in a certain way we're sort of agreeing. We're not agreeing, but we're saying it's not about behavior. It's about economic power. So it's about the behaviors that many of us engage in. We don't speak about all of us being illegal drivers, even though we all run stop signs here and now, or
the California stop. Right?
The California roll through, or in our neighborhood, we're really familiar with the streets. We go a little faster than we should. That's things that lots of us do, but not everyone gets in trouble for it. And I think that this report really speaks with the numbers. For example, in San Francisco, we did a Public Record Act request and got information about every arrest for driving on a suspended license. And 49% of those arrests were of black drivers, while Black people make up only 6% of San Francisco's population. So it's vastly disparate, and Black people are vastly overrepresented in those numbers. So I think the numbers really speak to show that that's not the whole picture.
Well, then when you're looking at the numbers, Elisa, and you look at, let's say, what they did in Chicago, a different problem we're talking about, but still very, very similar in other ways. They promoted an African American. Now he is the head of police there. Is that enough, and is that going to change, or does it go deeper, like you were saying, changing the laws and changing the rules? Like, what's the solution? And then when you hear the response that Mike just read, isn't it maybe acknowledging that there is a problem when you just look at the hard numbers? Yes. Take emotion aside.
Yes.
Just look at the facts.
And it's exciting to hear the police chief say, oh, we want to take into account these numbers. We want to change behavior because that is sorely needed. And it's going to need to be both change in behavior and perception and attacking implicit bias and taking into account the systemic things that are where the deck is just stacked against poor people and people of color.
What about changing the law?
Exactly. So we actually have a bill before the California State Legislature right now.
State Senator out of L.A.?
Yeah, Bob Hertzberg.
Bob Hertzberg.
Who we had a hearing this Tuesday, and the bill would stop license suspensions just because you can't afford to pay a ticket, and would also stop arrests. Say we don't need to take people to jail just because they couldn't afford to pay. And that bill, we actually had bipartisan support on Tuesday. All 11 committee members, Republicans and Democrats, voted to put that forward. I think it's a really common sense first step in a system that has a lot of change that it is.
Is it fair to say that maybe us, we as citizens, society, what can we do as opposed to just putting on the police department? Is there anything that we can do?
Yeah, I think the first thing for all of us when we hear information like this can be to blame the people. Well, why didn't they pay a ticket? Why did, isn't that their fault? And I think we have to acknowledge in our own minds implicit bias. So what are my own prejudices?
Or
and
what if I couldn't
those.
afford to pay that ticket? What would I do?
How would I feel if I had to drive my son to we have a client who drives his son to his leukemia treatments, his 3-year-old. He lost his license because he couldn't afford to pay, and he faced the choice of misdemeanor violating the law, getting arrested, or not being able to take his son to his cancer treatments. I think all of us recognize that we would make the same choice.
So if you're sitting at home, then call your assembly member, call your state senator, and have them vote for this Senate Bill 881.
Exactly.
And start changing things.
Sounds good to us.
All right,
Okay.
Elisa, appreciate your time, and thank you for coming in.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
both.
having us.
All right, and also we've posted a link to the reports on KTVU.com. Just go to our website there and you can look right under web links. We have it for you.